We got ourselves a fresh One Piece chapter, lads and ladies, and let me just say, you should have all believed me. Scopper Gaban is the GOAT after all. And this chapter is densely packed with a ton of new reveals, like not one, but 2 new Holy Knights, plus a glimpse at the true power of the Roger Pirates. But what may be even more important than all of that is the fact that something really twisted and evil is truly happening right now in Elbaf, and Shamrock is at the center of it. And while I really do want to get back to my weekly Scopper Gaban hype fest here, I do think we have to talk about these 2 new Holy Knights first. Okay, but before we can get into all of that, is that my good friend the Fleet Admiral in that panel over there?
Yes, hello, hi, it's me, the Fleet Admiral, and during my last adventure I got caught up in this really weird satanic summoning circle and ended up back here in Elbaf, and for the life of me, I just can't get a good internet connection out here. I asked some of the locals for the Wi-Fi password, and they just gave me this rock that makes rainbows.
Well, have you tried Opera GX?
You mean like the best internet browser out there, especially for world-class anime fans? No, I've actually never heard about that. Tell me more.
Anyways, yeah, with GX mods, you can customize your browsing experience with features like dedicated wallpapers and background music.
You mean I can play some killer tunes while I'm helping Shamrock subjugate Elbaf by hacking Shanks' Wi-Fi hockey?
I'm not sure that that's... okay. They've got custom sounds for your keyboard, and opening and closing tabs, splash screens, UI font and icons, and GX icons as well. They've even got shaders that can change your entire screen.
Well, it does sound great and all, but I'm supposed to be keeping an eye on this Loki guy while my coworkers go kidnap a bunch of kids. How am I supposed to keep myself entertained doing this really boring assignment here?
Actually, with the video pop-out feature, you can keep a video tab playing in the background while you're navigating other windows. I'm using it right now to watch One Piece for like the 80th time while I'm supposed to be doing my taxes.
Okay, that sounds pretty good, but surely they'll take a ton of time to switch to a new browser and get all my settings right. I've got like no time to waste. There are a ton of giant baddies on this island, and I'm trying to make one of them my wife right now, or 5 maybe.
That's actually the best part. Switching from your old browser to Opera GX is super easy thanks to the quick import tool that brings over all your settings. So you can just go use my link below to download Opera GX today.
Actually, be quiet for a second there. I just saw on Opera GX that the latest One Piece chapter dropped. Shouldn't you be talking about this?
Well, I was actually trying to... Alright, but let's get back to the chapter. Because contrary to what I thought was gonna happen, it does seem like Shamrock is now suddenly leaving Elbaf, which is a bit of a bummer, but at the same time, the reveal of 2 new Warriors of God more than makes up for that, I think. Let's name the guys. We've got Saint Shepard Summers, this bulky guy in his underpants. He's actually from the same family as one of the Gorosei, and I'll break that down shortly. And then there is Saint Limosiv Killingham, this very bizarre-looking kitten person. Akira, by the way, is a mythical yokai from Japanese and Chinese folklore, and I'm really confident that that's what this dude seems to be based on. And while the designs are pretty rad if you ask me, I genuinely think that they revealed some insane information that is gonna drastically shape the Elbaf arc and give us an idea about the future of the story as well. So first things first, let's talk about design. Summers is a bulky older dude with long flowing hair and is like big. Like we see that he's nearly the same size as the Kirin-like Killingham and absolutely towers over both Gunko and Shamrock. On a side note, he and I are wearing matching underwear, but much more importantly, I do think that his full design hints also at his powers. Because his actual military outfit does match his fellow Holy Knights, but it also is absolutely decked out in medals of honor and regalia. So to me, it's kind of clear that he has been around the block a few times at least based on how many awards he seems to have on his uniform, but I do also want to draw your attention to this rose emblem right here, as well as his sword's knuckle bow. Oh, yeah, fun fact, that specific portion of a sword guard has a name as well, the more you know, I guess, and I don't want you leaving a Ohara video without having learned something, right? But anyhow, it's clearly based on the thorns of a rose, matching that very emblem. But admittedly, it could actually be a flower on his chest, and that kind of ties into a power of his, I think. Because yeah, if you ask me, this dude is gonna have flower power. Like something about him is just giving me this eye attack with thorny rose whips and stuff like that vibes, like, which of course is interesting because it could line up pretty well with my theory about celestial dragons not actually having devil fruits. We've of course seen Admiral Greenbull use flowers with his forest fruit, and we do know that the flower fruit doesn't actually make flowers but give you more limbs. So if this dude does have flower powers like his design does seem to point towards to me, well then I kind of feel like it would have to be some sort of demonic rose sort of thing, not an actual devil fruit potentially. Though admittedly, I do have a crackpot theory that I want to talk about in a moment that has to do with his family, and it might actually tie in everything together here. For now though, I want to finish up talking about what his role might be in the squad of the Holy Knights. And I don't know about you, but I'm kind of getting the vibe that he's the sort of elder mentor figure among the Holy Knights. I can't quite put my finger on it, but something about the way that Oda keeps focusing on him several times in this chapter kind of makes me want to think that he'll be the one taking command of this mission since Shamrock is now leaving. And also I'm kind of getting really familiar anime vibe from this dude. Like, I'm gonna call it now, I think he's gonna be one of those intensely powerful but also like spookily relaxed villains. You know what I'm talking about, like the type that is just sort of a total badass without ever even having to try. And honestly, knowing that Gaban is on this island and has a very similar goofy and chill vibe despite being completely broken, I really think that Oda might be trying to juxtapose or just draw a parallel between these two particular figures here. But not only that, they might actually have way more in common than just their rocking old man hair and daddy vibes, because since he seems pretty old, I actually wouldn't be too surprised if Summers was actually also at God Valley competing against Garling as a contestant. Like, seriously, look at this dude. He's definitely older than the other three of the God Knights that we've met so far, and he does seem to line up with the characters like Gaban, Rayleigh, or Crocus age-wise much more. And I kind of feel like he might actually have an even deeper purpose in this arc, showing us some new flashback, maybe God Valley or something, or, you know, something in that nature. And then we also got a very interesting confirmation through this guy as well, and that's the fact that Summers is a part of the Shepherd family. Now, this makes him the first person we've ever seen to actually share a family name with one of the original Gorosei members. Which, you know, once again raises a bit of an interesting point about how long these dudes have actually been around. Like, do the regular celestial dragons know that they are alive to begin with? I mean, we do know that they are super old, like over 200 years at least, you know, based on the fact that Saturn was alive and looks like exactly the same as he did when Emeth actually climbed the red line and attacked Marijoa. So if all of the Gorosei are potentially immortal old men, wouldn't someone question why their great-great-grandfather is like still alive, looking the same, actively ruling over the entire Earth? But then again, you know, maybe not. Maybe the celestial dragons don't really care, or they just know about it, but I do think that there is something here, considering that specifically we see Jupiter, the youngest looking member of the Gorosei, having a confirmed family member that looks just way older than him. Now, regardless of that though, it's pretty cool to me that Oda seems to be giving us so much deep and interesting lore about the celestial dragons recently and their families after all this time, because it just kind of goes to show how much he's been trying to probably hold back from us at this point, really biding his time, waiting until this final phase of the series to start dropping some severe lore bombs. Speaking of which, I did notice a really cool connection between the Shepherd clan people, because Saint Jupiter here is a giant worm that is the god of agriculture, right? And this other shepherd now, Summers, seems to have a flower theme going on, and I just kind of find it interesting that all of these things are kind of tied together with earth and agriculture and cultivating things. So it kind of makes me thinking that maybe they're from an original kingdom way back during the second or maybe even the first world that focused on developing farm systems and agriculture for humanity or something like that. And it would actually pair quite nicely with a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about in some past theories. And of course, I also just can't help but once again think about the Harley text. I think this is gonna haunt us till the end of the story, where it actually talks about the forest god creating devils. So maybe there is some sort of tie there to this agriculture themed god knight and the family he's from, or it's just a cool, funny themed coincidence. I just felt like it might be worth pointing it out to you guys in case I'm right later on and can call back to this moment in the future and be like, I called it all along. But again, if you have ideas, let me know also. But enough about the shepherds now. Let's talk about the Kirin. No, not that Kirin, this Kirin. Now, for those of you who don't know, it seems like Killingham's hybrid-looking form is based on the ancient mythical creature known as the Kirin, which is even more obvious because it does tie into his name, seeing as the Chinese name for the same creature is the Quillin. And on top of that, it's also the name of a pretty good Japanese beer, though I'm more of a Sapporo fan right here. But I don't think that part is really gonna tie into the lore of this guy, but if it does, I'm all for it, Beercules. But with Oda, you honestly never really know, to be honest, so maybe it's gonna bust bust out some dragon, giraffe, drunken fist sort of thing. Oh, and actually, that's something I should probably mention as well. Giraffes are actually known as kirin in Japanese as well because they do share a lot of the traits with this mythical creature. In fact, probably historically, it might have been the inspiration, and then, you know, nobody in Japan or China ever saw a giraffe, but they heard about it, so that might have been how that got created. Anyway, speaking of which, I should probably talk about those traits since it might reveal some stuff about this new Holy Knight as well. And really, it does make a lot of sense for a Holy Knight to have a power based on this creature because the kirin is considered the most sacred and divine being in Japanese mythology, but its known traits sort of spit in the face of the actual Holy Knights. As you might remember from the absolutely terrible last Fantastic Beast movie, these kirins are symbols of purity and goodness, or sometimes also justice and wisdom. But I think that there is a way to spin it to fit the celestial dragons here, and it does seem to be sort of the path that Oda's taking with this, because Killingham is the first of the Holy Knights we've actually ever seen wear the signature celestial dragon bubble helmets. You know, the thing that's supposed to separate the celestial dragons from the low quality and poisonous, filthy air of the lower realms where all the filthy maggots live. And it kind of seems to me that Oda is giving this specific character this power as a somewhat ironic twist on the kirin's regular traits. What I'm saying here is that Killingham may be about purity, justice, and goodness, but from the perspective of the Tenryubito. And if Oda is actually taking this very ironic approach, which would be very Oda-like, it would make a lot of sense how he plans to tie in the behavioral stuff with the kirin as well, because the kirin are said to be delicate creatures who wouldn't even want to harm an insect. They are supposed to bring forth a golden era, and they only tread into the land of benevolent rulers and enlightened ones. So of course, it's just straight up ironic that this kirin is in the Holy Land during an era of war and oppression, and the Holy Land is ruled by Imu, one of the few people enlightened to the true history and the true nature of the One Piece world. And of course, it also ties into Elbaf being the arc about revealing huge truths, pun intended, that is tied to Nika the Sun God, as this realm would also be fit for a kirin to appear in. Only that something just tells me that this one doesn't exactly see it the same way. Like, maybe it's the bubble giving that energy off, or maybe it's the fact that he's about to, you know, kidnap children? Who knows? Could be either, but also I might just be pulling at strings here. But the air filter mask portion of Killingham's mask does seem to have a similar shape and structure to this Holy Knight from chapter 1096, I think. You know, the one with the mask that has the number 46 on it. And totally unrelated, but it's the same sort of snout shape that kind of reminds me of the Sniffits in Super Mario. I really don't have a better term to use for that shape, so Sniffit mask it is, I guess. Like, maybe Killingham and this dude are related. I could see it. Alright, but now that we've covered these designs, I now want to focus a little bit more on the giant lore that they revealed as well. For example, we learned what the name of that magic circle thing is because, woo! Go team! According to these guys, it's called the Abyss, and that's a super specific word that I am really excited to talk about. But before we get into all of the eldritch horror and lore implication of that term, I also want to point out an offhand comment that Summers makes in this chapter as well, because while he's putting his pants on, he quickly asks why they are in Elbaf, seeing as it's a non-affiliated country. And then suddenly asking where you're gonna visit Harold's grave to Shamrock, which I'm like, yeah, that's right. There is some absolutely incriminating evidence here. Like, Detective Manu is on the case, and I do believe that we were right. Like, Harold looks really guilty. Now, of what? I don't quite fully know that yet, but, you know, he had to be doing something really shady, seeing as Harold and Shamrock are somehow tied together now. Either that or Harold is tied to the world government directly, but I do think it's more to do with Shamrock specifically, as I just can't see Shamrock, out of all people, visiting Harold's grave if he was just some dude that the world government was tied to. Now, I don't know if the comment was meant sarcastically or not, but either way, when you really think about it, this could explain why Shamrock warped into the throne room and confirms a sneaky suspicion that I've actually had about Harold's true motives being way darker and way more twisted than everyone might suspect. Simply put, I think there is no way that Harold is as good and benevolent as everyone on Elbaf thinks he is. I've already made several videos going over how this sort of blind love of Harold and the blind hatred of Loki is setting up a really major plot reveal at the end of Elbaf, or maybe even at the start of Elbaf, and this one throwaway line from Summers does seem to bolster this idea even more, which really does make a lot of sense when you really look back at everything in this arc so far. Like, why are the Holy Knights trying to recruit Loki? Well, it does make more sense, of course, if Shamrock has ties to his father and actually knows about Loki's true powers. Why does Gaban not seem to care if Luffy frees Loki? Well, to me, it would say it's probably because Loki's punishment is actually unwarranted. Like, he's chained up because of what everyone thinks he did, but Gaban is really giving off a very different vibe here when it comes to Loki. He seems pretty cool with letting the Straw Hats free him, and that might be because Scopper himself knows that Harold was actually doing some pretty bad, messed up things in the background. Alright, but with that, I've covered my initial thoughts on the new Holy Knights, but I do want to talk more about the Abyss. And while I'd love to get into the dark abyss that is my lonely and broken heart, let's actually talk about these sick demon-like powers instead. And just for full disclosure here, Abyss is the early translation name for this power, and I haven't got my eyes yet on the Japanese version of this chapter, so I couldn't verify myself. But just know that if this gets corrected or updated, then some of what I'm about to go over might not exactly be accurate, but it does seem pretty likely, and I would assume that the translation at least resembles the word abyss. So what is an abyss? Well, it's a big dark hole, but normally it's a giant endless pit, and just reading that term made me think of the two giant abysses that we do know already exist in One Piece. Because there is one directly under Enies Lobby, and there is at least one more where the Lulusia Kingdom used to be, which kind of makes me think that these things are all tied together somehow, and that maybe the name of this power is something that Emu created to represent their powerful demonic abilities. Now, you might also know that the Abyss as a concept is often also tied to eldritch and cosmic horrors. I'm talking about creatures and nightmarish things beyond comprehension, talking Cthulhu, normally tied to a demonic or otherworldly entity. And I mean, come on, I feel like Emu seems to be fitting that bill pretty well. I'm kind of starting to think that the shadowy appearance that Oda uses to represent Emu may not actually even be a silhouette, but it might just straight up be Oda's way of saying you could just straight up not comprehend what they actually look like, even if you tried. Which, I'm not sure if that's the case, but it would be pretty cool. Now, regardless, we also seem to learn how the teleportation effect of the Abyss works this chapter, because Summers and Killingham explain that you do need to have a special mark or tattoo on your body in order to actually be able to go through it. And that reveal actually makes a lot of sense to me, because if there wasn't some sort of restraint on this power, things would get really crazy and messy, like super fast. Basically, Emu could just boop, warp anyone, anywhere, wherever, and it would just be way too broken. But speaking of which, the Abyss also seems to have yet another constraint, because Gunko creates the mark that summons Summers and Killingham to her and Shamrock's location, and this seems to point to the fact that the warp points have to be pre-established somehow, or that at the very least, someone might have to be there physically to place a marking first to create a warp point. Which, you know, would make a lot of sense why Saturn needed to travel to Egghead Island physically, but then the other guys could just appear once he potentially set up a mark there himself. But with that in mind, I don't know if it's just me or not, but this seems to really back up my point about Harold being tied to Shamrock potentially even more, because that would mean that there was already a warp point inside of the castle, and maybe that's why Scopper Gaban had already known the layout of the castle and had hidden the key away, because he knew if the Holy Knights were to invade Elbaf, they would be arriving right here. Alright, but speaking of my man Scopper, I think it's time we talk about the big boy here, because we get to see him bust out some absolutely incredible skills in this chapter, but we also get to understand a little bit more of his true motives as well, I think. First up, I gotta say though, my old man here got some real moves. He's fast, like really fast, forcing Luffy straight into Gear 5, and he can unleash an attack strong and fast enough that it warranted Zoro, out of all people, leaping in to protect Luffy. Also, can we just take a moment to appreciate how funny this dude actually is? Like, I may be biased, but dude, he just casually calls out Shanks for making Luffy return the Straw Hat to him before then shoving a key inside Luffy's mouth. Like, I don't know, I just love the action choreography that Oda has been using with Luffy lately, and the way his body is breaking and bending kind of reminds me so much of early One Piece, and I kind of do hope that Oda was just gonna keep keep this up for the arc at least. Oh, also for all of the Sanji fans amongst you, I should call out that Scopper may have Conqueror's Haki. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes because Oda has kind of started to use Haki Lightning to just symbolize advanced armament infusion as well, which could be what Scopper does with the key in this panel, but it could just straight up be Conqueror's Haki, and I kind of feel like it should be, right? Let me know what you think though. Like maybe this will be how Zoro learns the process of making a black blade from Gaban as well. The only reason I'm a little bit hesitant to say it's definitely Conqueror's Haki is because Luffy doesn't call it out as that. He just calls it Haki, and I kind of feel like Luffy and Zoro might have a bigger reaction if they saw him bust out some truly broken Conqueror's Haki, but since it could be, Oda could also be hinting that both of Roger's wings had the will of the Conqueror, and so, you know, Sanji might end up getting it after all. Fingers crossed. To me, the jury is still out on that one, but the thing that I am truly most interested in at this point is what Scopper actually knows and how that is gonna tie into the rest of this arc. Because I think one thing that we can all agree on is that this dude seems to know a lot more than he's letting on, and with the arrival of the new Holy Knights at long last, we might get some absolutely crazy lore reveals through the Minister of Love here. And in general, just seeing as the Holy Knights are about to turn Elbaf into their own game board, which Scopper might actually have an even bigger role of presenting us a God Valley flashback as well. After all, the last time that we know for a fact that the Holy Knights had a game was God Valley, and Scopper himself, I remind you, was there. In fact, I have a feeling that Oda might be drawing a lot of parallels between Elbaf and God Valley, and seeing as we already have a couple of survivors on the island like Kuma and Scopper, there's a pretty decent chance we get to see more of that legendary battle parallels here at some point as well. I do have to say though, I think that there is so much to talk about with the God Valley parallel, and like that potentially happening again, I'm gonna put that into a completely different video that's gonna drop in 2 days, so stay tuned for that. Or if you're watching this on Tuesday, it's already out, so go check that out after. But with that being said, another cool reveal in the Scopper Gaban interaction is that we finally got confirmation about his true intentions with Luffy. Because as we all kind of guessed, he clearly basically just wanted to validate Shanks' claims about this kid and see for himself how Roger's successor was actually like. I mean, Scopper even specifically tells Luffy that, you know, the straw hat there suits you way better than the, you know, the helmet, which is a very sentimental moment from one of Roger's closest friends. Now, did Luffy realize any of that? Nope. Not at all, of course. And it kind of seems like Scopper doesn't want Luffy to know right now that he was a Roger pirate, at least not yet. And there was something about how Oda framed Scopper's last interaction with Luffy that really seems to be pointing us towards a big reveal or a massive training arc in the future, as we speculated in the last video here. Because come on, dude, like Scopper saying, "Find me if everything is all," like, implies to me a couple of things here. One point could be that things will definitely not be safe and good in Elbaf when Luffy leaves the island, and also that he'll have to return to meet Scopper Gaban later on during this arc. Or Luffy will barely save Elbaf, and the potential Scopper Gaban training arc will start because the Straw Hats have realized that they're gonna need to be way more powerful in order to take on the Holy Knights, the Gorosei, the government, everyone basically. And the second option seems a lot more likely to me, considering that Scopper has a kid and the Holy Knights are about to steal, you know, all the kids. So Scopper training Luffy to help him get his own son back is just, in my opinion, way more interesting than a just straight up peaceful resolution to the entire arc. Like maybe they'll end up going straight to the Holy Land after Elbaf on an all or nothing mission to save all the giant kids, which yes, sounds a little bit crazy, but this chapter kind of seems to hint at that, right? There's kind of something that has been bothering me after reading it, and it's why Shamrock is leaving right now. Like, he just arrived, and based on it being an order from either the Gorosei or Imu, right? It does seem like Shamrock is being brought back to defend the Holy Land from something. Is that the vibe you've been getting? Like, Summers implied that ever since the Reverie, things have been unstable up there, and yeah, I mean, that's pretty fair. We did see the revolutionaries invade, Kuma just kind of blitzed through the place, and now the Holy Knights are on the move as well. Oh, and then there's the entire blockade and them slowly starving to death. Like right now, Marijoa might be the weakest that it's ever been, and clearly Shamrock is really powerful, and it seems like the Celestial Dragons would rather have him playing defense right now instead of going out into the world being on the attack. But then again, we have to ask ourselves, why though? Like, why send him out to claim Elbaf if you were just gonna bring him back immediately? Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So instead, I kind of want to propose the idea that someone is about to invade Marijoa, and the Gorosei and Emu realize that, so they now summoned their strongest soldier back. So I will say who that could be is kind of up in the air, but I think that there are 3 very likely candidates. The most likely and obvious in my eyes would of course be Monkey D. Dragon, because he said it himself, the revolutionaries' real fight begins when the Holy Knights leave Marijoa, and I always kind of interpreted that as him defeating them somewhere on the ocean, but he just straight up could have meant that they would raid Marijoa when Emu started to move his game pieces around and kind of wait for them to leave the house. After all, based on everything that we know, the Holy Knights have just been in the Holy Land the entire series, it seems, and they have just recently left for the first time in many months or years. So Dragon could have just actively been waiting for their defenses to drop a little bit before going in on an all-out attack. But then a completely different option would also be Red Hair Shanks himself, because let's face it, Oda likes to deliver epic moments, and right now, the most legendary thing that could happen, I think, would be a Shamrock versus Shanks battle, right? Like maybe Shanks is gonna go back to the Holy Land for the second time in his life before he goes to claim the One Piece, and Garling wanted to bring his family together for a little family reunion in case things go south with Shanks. And I can't lie, it would be pretty damn cool, but I do think that Dragon is more likely here. However, if Oda really wanted to throw a crazy curveball out there, there is one more pirate who is on the move doing some crazy power plays with his eyes on the Holy Land specifically, and that's of course Blackbeard. Could Shamrock be returning to Marijoa because the worst pirate to ever do it has just started invading the Holy Land? Because that would certainly be a twist none of us have been ready for. Now I will say probably not, as it does seem like Blackbeard wants to join the world government. After all, he's one of the most powerful pirates and he wants to conquer the world. And I always just kind of assumed that would be at the end of the series, but what if Blackbeard thinks that he could just overthrow Emu right now since the Holy Knights aren't in the castle? But then thinking about it, like I feel like he would probably want to claim the One Piece first, no? Which, I mean, he very well might do sooner rather than later. I mean, he's got the motive, he's got the resources, and you better believe he's got the willpower. And if you really want to know just how close Blackbeard is right now to claiming the One Piece, you can check out that video right here where I break down exactly that for you. It is really scarily close, let me say that. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. Hype chapter, Scopper Gaban, we are feasting right now. Shout out to all the Patreons. If you want to go check out how you can get a bunch of really cool perks and also support the channel, then, you know, link in the description below. And otherwise, I will see you on Tuesday for, you know, the really big God Valley and how Elbaf could turn into God Valley video. All right, bye.